Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is awaken. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear awaken used is to mean to cause someone to stop sleeping. Now, I'll make a quick note. Yesterday's verb was awake, and we talked about either stopping sleeping, so kind of meaning ourselves, or stopping someone else from sleeping. Here, we're only talking about causing someone to stop sleeping. A second way you might hear awaken used is to mean to cause a particular feeling. So as someone maybe finds a new passion, a new interest, they might use this verb to describe that feeling that they're experiencing. A third way you might hear awaken used is to mean to make someone aware of something for the very first time. You should know awaken is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to form awakening. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, awaken, ends in a voiced N sound. So our past tense ending is just going to make a D sound, and we're not adding an extra syllable as we say it. It should sound like this: awakened, awakened. Okay. Now, there are two phrasal verbs that we're going to discuss, and you'll see the meanings here aren't all that different, but I wanted you to be aware that awaken from, again, goes back to our first definition of causing someone to stop sleeping. An example of this: she was awakened from her nap by a thunderous noise. I think this particular wording you might see in a lot of literature, storytelling, especially maybe older forms of it as well. A second phrasal verb you might encounter is awaken to. This matches back to our third definition of the verb, which was to become aware of something. An example of this might be: people are awakening to the very serious harm of having PFAS or forever chemicals in our water. So this sentence might not make a lot of sense to you, but there have been a lot of news articles, other pieces on various journalism platforms talking about certain chemical compounds that just sort of seep into our soil, into our water, and can have a really big and harmful impact on ourselves. So this is something I would say a bit newer to the general public. Unfortunately, there are people who have known about it for 50 or more years, but now, again, the general public is becoming more aware of this harm in our really everyday lives. Now, today, we're going to take a look at using our verb of the day in the passive voice. And it's been a little while since we've practiced active versus passive, so I'm just going to give a quick refresher. Most of the time when I give you example sentences, they are in the active voice. And what I mean by this is I begin the sentence with the person or the thing that is responsible for our action, for our verb. So, as an example, I have the sentence, Brad washes the dishes. Okay? Here, I know Brad is responsible for the action of washing. Second sentence, they clean the house on Mondays. I know some group of 2 or more people are responsible for the action of cleaning. But sometimes in English, you're going to see or you're going to hear sentences that are in the passive voice. So they begin with the person or the thing that is acted on or acted upon. And said another way, they are the person or the thing that receives the action. So in passive voice, you might not know who is responsible. Or if you do, that responsible person or people comes at the end of the sentence after the preposition by. And when I discuss this in classes, many times my students always ask, why? Why do I now have to learn active and passive and all these different verb tenses? And the first reason many people use the passive voice is that they don't know who to say is responsible. They don't know the subject, right? They don't know to identify a certain name or a group as being responsible. A second reason is that maybe this person or thing that is responsible for the action, it might not be very important. And this kind of connects to the third reason, and that is the writer or the speaker. They want their audience to really focus on that object. So by moving the object to the front of a sentence or the beginning of a sentence, it can kind of catch people's attention just a little bit better. A fourth reason, and this might be a bit regional and certainly cultural. In some cultures, we don't want to blame others, right? And so the most common example you'll hear is that instead of saying this person made a mistake, right? That's clear blame. They are responsible for the action of making the mistake, right? We just say a mistake was made, right? A little bit nicer, a little bit softer without assigning that particular blame. So now, with all of this in mind, let's practice our verb of the day, awaken, and we're going to focus on the simple present. We'll practice both passive and active voice. We use both passive and active voice in the simple present to talk about our habits and our routines. We also use it to discuss facts and feelings. So in the passive voice, our structure will be to sort of start with that object, so the thing or the person acted on. Then we're going to use the present form of be, so that's am, is, or are. And then we are going to use the participle form of our verb. So an example might be, he is awakened by the sounds of birds each morning. Right? So this might be kind of a routine, something that occurs quite regularly every morning. Now, in the active voice, right, my structure, right, I start with my subject, then I have my verb, and I always have to pay attention in that simple present in the active voice. If my subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to just use the base verb. But if my subject is he, she, or it, then I'm going to add an S to the end of the verb. And you can see that in my example here. He awakens to the sounds of birds each morning. Okay, so that is active voice. Now, let's take a look at passive voice, negative. So here, again, our structure is to start with our object or thing that receives the action. Then we're going to use our be verb, not, and then the participle form of the verb. You can see that here. They aren't awakened easily by average alarm clocks. Okay, so here we have another example with by, so we kind of know who or what is responsible for this action. In the active voice, our structure is to start with our subject, then we use do or does, then not, and then our base verb. So another example here. They don't awaken easily. They're heavy sleepers, right? So trying to cause them to stop sleeping is not easy, is what that sentence is saying. Finally, let's look at making yes or no questions. We can do this in the passive voice. Again, we're going to start with a present form of be. Then we're going to have that person or thing that receives the action. Then we have the participle form of the verb. An example here. Is the character awakened by the commotion? Okay. And that same sentence, that same idea in active voice is going to follow the pattern of starting with do or does. Then we have our subject, so the thing responsible for the action, and then our base verb. So here it is again. Does the commotion awaken the character? So all of these example sentences are really tying back to that first meaning around causing someone to stop sleeping. Now, let's take a moment to talk about a few words that are related to our verb awaken. And the first word we're going to look at is a noun form. So you can see the suffix er being added onto our verb. So we have awakener. And hopefully that ending suffix tells us this is a person or thing that awakens, right? So it ties back to our verb here. So this isn't a super common word that I think you'll hear or see very often, but still kind of good to review that pattern. An example of this noun in a sentence might be, is coffee your preferred awakener in the morning, right? So this would be a thing that makes you maybe a bit more alert. I know some people have their coffee pots set to automatically start brewing so they can start to smell, and that helps them get up in the morning. Another related word, and you're going to recognize this as our progressive form, so you can think of this as the gerund or noun form, awakening. This can have a few different meanings. One would just be to refer to the act of waking from sleep. An example of this might be something you see on some prescription medication. So something like this. This medicine may cause early awakenings. So for whatever reason, while taking a particular medicine, it might cause you to stop sleeping earlier than what is normal. A second way you'll hear awakening used is to refer to an act or a particular moment where someone becomes more aware of something. An example of this meaning in a sentence might be, you are in for a rude awakening if you think college professors will accept this type of work. I heard sentences like this quite often when I was in high school. So what they were saying, right, to many students, it wasn't just directed at me personally. I was a pretty good student. But they were trying to make us aware that certain standards would be expected of us, and if we didn't start preparing, then we were going to have a really negative and sudden experience as soon as we started college courses. Another way you might hear awakening used as a noun is to refer to the beginning of something. So this really kind of connects back to that third definition of the verb we looked at earlier. An example of this might be, the murder of George Floyd started a global awakening about systemic racism. Now, some people might reflect on this sentence and think, no, Katie, people have been doing this for years and years and years, and absolutely no argument there. But I think for many people, particularly many white people, that particular moment really was a starting point for them to become more aware. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.